Gentlemen, the day has finally come. That's right. The day when I finally answered that great question I keep getting. What is up with all these statues of the gods behind your back? Well, we're going to go into each and every one of them. And the reason why that I put them in every video. Here, today, on Big Pretty Man. And welcome back to Big Pretty Man. The channel for the extra large man who wants to live his life large and in charge. I'm your host, Timothy Big Pretty Crowe. I'm a wardrobe and lifestyle consultant for the extra large man. Alright guys, I finally got enough requests, both in my email and in my comments below, as well as even a couple of people reached out to me from my Facebook. And also some friends have asked me to please tell us about this shelf of gods that you have behind your back, and why exactly do you do all your videos in front of them. Some people have actually said it's a little distracting, and I'm sorry about that. But the reason, first I'll say that the reason is that I have kind of a limited space to do this, and really didn't have any appropriate wall to do this. And so I was like, when I started off, I'm like, you know, I'll do it in front of my shelf of my gods, my collection of gods. And, you know, and I actually kind of, and even though it may be slightly distracting, it's kind of become almost a signature with me now. And in a lot of ways, I kind of like it because it kind of reflects who I am in a lot of ways, and I'll explain why. So, you know, first a little bit about me that I haven't really went into. I don't really normally go into my regular profession and all of that. I have worked as a consultant, you know, for men's big and tall stores. But that's just one of the jobs I've held. I've had a lot of vocations. As I said, according to my friends, I've lived a bit of an exciting life. I worked for nearly 2 decades as a certified nursing assistant. I worked as an over the road truck driver, long haul, regional runs. I actually hauled steel for Toyota, supplying steel for Toyota on a flatbed truck, which is not fun. Paid a lot of money, but it was not fun. I've worked, I tried my hand at stand-up comedy. I used to also write magazine articles and short stories that I got published in various pulp magazines under an alias, so good luck at trying to find them. So, so I've done a lot of things, but finally I decided to go back to school rather late in life. I went back in my late 30s, and I worked really hard, and I managed to ultimately get into the University of Pennsylvania, one of the top schools in America. I think it's in the top 14 in the world, and it's Ivy League, baby. I'm very proud of that. I worked very hard to get there, and I did finally get my I ended up getting a master's degree in my field, which my field is comparative religious studies. Now, I've had a fascination with religions of the world since I was a very small boy. I think I started around 11 or 12 when I really got a real interest, and I read every book I could get my hands on. And even during all those careers I was doing, all those jobs, I always found time to study and do more field work. I actually have studied the Bible and did the catechism with a Catholic priest. I studied the Torah with a rabbi and the Talmud with a rabbi. I've studied the Quran with an imam. I've studied the Bhagavad Gita, and some of the other literatures of Hinduism with a Swami. Actually 2 of them. And I've also studied. I used to hang out with neo-pagans, and I've attended Sabbaths. Even skyclad, as skewed as that may be. So I've really thrown myself with heathens. I've actually really thrown myself into the study of religion through its sociological, anthropological, and its cultural influences and philosophies. Let me say, I'm not a theologian. I'm that is someone usually working towards, that's a study of God. Someone usually working for become some form of clergy. Mine wasn't. Mine is more like religious anthropology type of approach. I'm more interested in the social impacts and the cultural impacts and looking at the philosophies and the different theories, things like that. That's comparative religious studies. And I do teach this. I'm an adjunct professor, which means that I get paid per class, and the money is horrible. Adjuncts in this country get paid horrible wage. So you have to work other jobs. So I do actually work another job. I'm actually a supervisor of security at a major museum. But still, this great interest that I've had in religion and my education, I started collecting statues of the gods, or and iconography from different religions. And this is actually just a small part of my much bigger collection. I have a lot of other wall hangings and from all the different religions and paintings and things like that. But this is my little shelf of the gods that I collect. I have actually quite a few more that are not on this shelf, but I can understand why people would ask me about it, but as you can see, by having them there, they have kind of come a signature with me, and it really is who I am. This represents the fascination and the passion of my life. That's kind of a symbol of them. So, and I've had quite a few have asked me about them, but particularly my good friend Ash Jones from over at the Chap Guide. I found out that his mother is actually a big fan of mine, and I'm very flattered. So, most especially for her, I'm going to give a description of the gods on this shelf. So, Marlene Andrews Jones, this is especially dedicated to you. Okay, guys, I'm doing this handheld, so you'll have to deal with me. All right, let's start here at the top. The top we have the god Set, or Sut. Set was the brother of Osiris and Isis. He was also seen as the god of deserts, of storms, of chaos. But he also served a certain purpose in Egyptian society within the Egyptian mythology, is that he stood at the barge of the sun with a spear to slay the serpent Apep, who was the serpent of chaos. So he served a certain order, a part of the Ma'at of ancient Egypt. He was later villainized and actually demonized. There is some speculation he may be the inspiration for Satan, which Satan actually means eternal Set. So even though there's no real evidence for this, and there's no record of him ever being called Satan, it is an interesting possibility. I mean, he did have a forked tail, and of course these very distinct ears. They're known as the said animal, and we actually don't know what this animal was. It may be fictional because it had a forked tail and these squared ears. Some people have said a donkey and different other things, but we really have no evidence for that. Okay, the next one we have is the Greek god Apollo, and this is from the Apollo Belvedere, which is from about the 2nd century. So Apollo, of course, is the god of the son of Zeus, the god of healing, the god of poetry, of music, and of wisdom. So I think most people are pretty familiar with Apollo. He was later seen in Hermetic groups as like the source of all wisdom in some secret societies. And beside him, of course, is the goddess Athena, and this is based on the Pallas Athena. Athena was the Greek goddess of wisdom, also of war. She was the daughter of Zeus, who burst life from Zeus's head, fully grown woman. And she usually carried the owl of wisdom with her, which is one of the reasons owls are associated with wisdom. So next to that is actually one of my personal favorites, and that is the triple goddess. And in this guise is in the goddess Bridget, the goddess of from Ireland. And what I find interesting about this particular statue, I love this statue, is that it shows the triple goddess and very much the as above, so below, which is the most ancient of the religious belief systems. Well, maybe even the first real evolved religious belief system. What happens in the natural world reflects what happens in the supernatural world. Also, what happens in our lives is reflected in the lives of the gods. So, actually, that's kind of the source for astrology. What happens in the sky affects the earth. But here we see the goddess in 3 different phases. And it's related, once again, with the phases of the moon. Why? Because women's menstrual cycles are very similar to the tides, very related with the moon and the tides of the sea. So we have that relation. And as we see in one moon, she is a young maiden, fresh in life, which is related with the gifts of flowers, which is the spring. And in the second depiction during the full moon, the fullness of life, we have the pregnant maiden. And is reflected here with the harvest, which once again, represents the summer and the harvest field. When the earth gives forth its bounty in birth. So the relation with the pregnant woman, and then of course in latter life you have in the waning moon of life you have the ancient woman, the lady of the hearth, which is shown with the cauldron, also relates the mysteries possibly of magic. The owl meaning showing her wisdom. The woman of the hearth, the wiser old woman of the hearth of the family and clan. I think it's a very powerful symbol, and I really love this. That's the reason I got it. Now, next to that, we have a modern interpretation of the god Cernunnos. And we don't know Cernunnos' real name. He was a Celtic god, and the only records we have of this god's name is from a Roman statue that has Cernunnos below it, which is probably a Roman duration of something like Cairn, but even that's speculation. And this is, like I said, a rather modern interpretation from the Gundestrup cauldron, which shows a horned god with the hooves of a beast, of a satyr type creature, with holding a torque as well as a snake. And his purpose has really been disputed. A lot of people thought he was like a god of the wilderness, a god of the wood. However, a recent study by a very interesting gentleman that gave a very interesting thesis says that he may have actually been a god of commerce, which I find really interesting. Okay, now this next one, of course, is the god Pan, and this is a modern rendition to it. God, the god of Arcadia, the god of shepherds, of the wilderness, of fecundity, mischief. And the flocks, of course. He really was kind of the spirit of nature and the spirit of animal husbandry, playing his pan flute, which is still well known. And this actually is a very special statue for me, because I actually bought it at the Atlantis bookstore in London. And the Atlantis bookstore, which is right down from the British Museum, has been there over nearly 100 years, and it was where all the occult alumni of the early 20th century used to hang out. We're talking Dion Fortune. We're talking about Gerald Gardner. We're talking about, I think McGregor Mathers may have stepped in, even though he was a little earlier than that. But even more than that, we had Aleister Crowley used to be in there quite often, as well as Yeats and some of the others. So and I went in there on my last visit in 2019, and the lady that runs it is very sweet. She actually lets me use the restroom and see the ritual room they had downstairs that Gardner used when witchcraft was still illegal. And she told me I could use the let me use the bathroom, and let me know the plumbing had not been changed since Crowley's time. So it's a great honor to take a crap where the beast himself had planted on the throne. shaking the camera, but I don't care. So it's a really special piece. I had a hard time getting that in the suitcase, by the way. Of course, right next to this is the goddess Demeter. And Demeter is, of course, the goddess of seasons, of the harvest. I particularly like this. It's from the same company that made the other two. And I like this particular rendition. And I kind of put it there because, speaking of that, the horned gods. I have a fascination with horned gods because, in some forms of neo-paganism, the horned god is seen as like one of the two most ancient deities, along with the goddess or the Earth Mother. And even though that's a little bit disputed, Murray put that forward, Margaret Murray, years ago. But I do think there may be something to it because two of the most ancient figures worshipped that we know, going back to Paleolithic times, was the Venuses that we see, and we have a lot of depiction. I'll be talking about that in a minute with the Willendorf. But also we found the symbol, the rock painting, the cave painting of the sorcerer, which looks to be a shaman wearing antlers and a mask. And actually, we've actually found antlers with skull, the part of the skull, and the skulls have been cut open for eye holes, and they look exactly like the sorcerer's painting. So I think, so the two most ancient gods we know of are a horned god, which kind of matches with Paleolithic people would have been hunters and hunter-gatherers, and a kind of an earth goddess. So I have and these kind of horned gods were carried out through most cultures, from Egypt to Babylon to the Greeks, with Pan, and so in satyrs. So this is a very big archetype in the earliest of religious ideals. But anyway, back to of course, and I would see these goddesses like Athena and Brigid and Demeter here as being part of that tradition as well. Now we're jumping across the world here at the end to India, and of course I have this wonderful image of Krishna, one of the avatars of Vishnu, one of the three major gods in the Hindu religion, or the native religion of India. And in fact, this particular statue was a gift from a friend of mine who's the head of the Sanskrit department at University of Penn. So it holds some special meaning to me. And beside of it, this little guy here, I'm actually kind of proud of him too. This is actually a worshipful statue of a guru, and this guru is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Now, if you're not familiar with that name, he is the one that started ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, better known as the Hare Krishnas. He came over here in the late 60s, and started, with very little, and he started this entire religion, which by the time he died, there were hundreds of temples, over 10 to 20,000 Hare Krishnas. So, actually, it was the Hare Krishnas that actually give me this small deity, this small idol of Prabhupada with the dress and all that. And actually, I need to wash his robe. So it kind of has some special meaning. I thought, and where else would I put him but right in front of Krishna, the deity that he was so dedicated to. Now, Krishna also was presented in the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord, which is actually a very small section of the very massive Mahabharata, where Krishna was the charioteer for Arjuna. And Arjuna didn't want to fight, so Krishna gave him this wonderful religious and spiritual pep talk, telling him basically the entire cosmology of Hinduism, at least from their point of view, and then revealed his true divine self for Arjuna, and basically had Arjuna know that this was his duty. Nothing really dies. You do your duty, and as things reincarnate and just get recycled, to follow his bliss. It's one of the most wonderful pieces of religious literature in the world, and actually one of my favorite out of all the religious studies of the world. Now, next to that, we have, of course, the god Shiva doing the dance of destruction. This is a rather famous depiction of Shiva. Shiva was was the god of destruction and rebirth. He was the god of wizards and kind of the outsider god that was never really a part of the court of the gods. He stood outside of it, as did his followers. So he's kind of the god of the outsiders, and I actually love the mythologies on him. Now, beside that, of course, is his son, the famous Ganesh, the elephant-headed god. And there's this story that Krishna got angry and basically chopped his son's head off, and then had to replace it, and the only replacement he could find was an elephant's head. So he's the god of luck and of wisdom. And he's commonly depicted, and probably one of the most popular deities in Hinduism. Now, continuing to the next shelf, you'll see two statues. These two statues here of the god Odin, or Woden, he's sometimes pronounced, the Norse god, the king of the gods, the god of wisdom, the god of war. He was seen as in this particular statue, which is actually from Dryad Designs made by Paul Borda. I actually really love his statues. He's shown with his two ravens, Munin and Hunin, which basically means thought and memory, and his two wolves, Gary and Fricka, which both mean the ravenous. So placed with his spear, and of course Odin hung from the tree of knowledge, upside down, and gave up an eye for knowledge, for wisdom, and for an all-seeing. Odin is the all-powerful who rules in Valhalla, where the honorable dead go for all eternity. Now, like I said, this is a more recent, the Dryad. It's got the symbol of Odin in the middle, and this is a more recent, rendition. However, this ancient one here, it's believed to be Odin because it's missing an eye, and it's almost definitely a figure of an ancient Norse Viking symbol statue for Odin. Now, also right here, I have a little berserker, which they were dedicated to Odin. They went berserk. They worked themselves up into a wild rage, and said that with such adrenaline, such power, that none could destroy them. And this one actually comes from a famous chess set that's in the British Museum, and I actually got this replica of what we believe is a berserker, because it's a warrior chewing on his shield. So, and I thought, where else to put the little berserker but right next to the god Odin. Now, besides that, we have two statues. This one is actually inspired by this ancient one. We'll start with the ancient one, and these, of course, are of Thor, the mighty Thor, not the cartoon one, but the god, the great Norse god Thor, son of Odin. The one who kills the frost giants with Mjolnir, his great hammer. And it's believed that this is the Ireland, the Ireland replica of the piece that was found in Iceland, and it's actually believed to be Odin because it's holding this hammer, and it is in the cross-like shape usually that Mjolnir was shown, with a cap and all that. Now, there's been some debate that maybe it wasn't, but most agree that it is most likely Odin. It was Thor. In fact, some people think this may have been a Hnefatafl, the famous board game of the Vikings. This may have been a center king piece. And of course, this one, once again, by Paul Borda. Beautiful modern rendition of it. I really love that. Of the same statue. So I have really affinity for the god Thor. And I may notice in my videos I wear Thor's hammer because, I'm descended from Scandinavians and Saxons, and as well as from Norway. So yeah, and those people descended from Vikings. So, my ancestors worshipped Thor for thousands of years, long before the rise of Christianity. So I wear the necklace to honor that. Now, beside of that is, once again, a modern and an ancient rendition, a replica and a modern rendition of it, and that is of the god Tyr, the god of justice, the god of law, the god of lawgiving. And the story goes that Tyr helped trick Fenrir, the great giant wolf who will swallow the moon and help destroy the world during Ragnarok. He helped trick him into tying him up by swearing that he'd be let loose, and to keep his bond, he put his hand in Fenris's mouth, and of course Fenris, when he didn't get loose, he bit it off. So he sacrificed his hand. There's a lot of meaning in that, because this is the lawgiver, the upstander of law, and and deals, and fairness. And this god lied, and he paid the price with his hand. So it's almost a statement for law and order and the repercussions of not keeping your word and upholding the law, but yet showing that sometimes you have to do what's necessary for the better good. It's a wonderful metaphoric story. Now, that's the reason they think that this statue may be of Tyr. I'm not really sure, mostly because of the missing arm. Well, the arm could have broke off, but I do like it, and it does have a horn helmet. And of course, we all know Vikings didn't wear horn helmets. That come from 19th century opera. Speaking of that, this next statue is actually one of Freya, the fertility goddess of the Norse, and this is actually a rendition of a 19th century artistic depiction that's been rendered here, riding her great boar. And next to this is actually one of my favorites, and this is believed to be, this is the Raetland figure, and it's believed to be of Freyr, the god Freyr, or Frey, Freyr. And of course, this is an ithyphallic symbol, as you can see. It has the erect phallus, and stroking his beard. And it's believed that this is the god Frey, even though it's been disputed. And this may have also been a Nefertafel board piece. Others, I think it probably was a figure of Freyr. And it is definitely one of my most favorite and gaudy. Okay, and of course we're going back to Greece now with these last few here. You have the god Zeus and his goddess wife Hera. I don't think I need a lot of descriptions of the king and queen of the gods of Greece. I think that's pretty much well known. But I will say this: my name is Timothy, which is a Greek name, the Greek rendering of Timotheos, or Timotheos, which means honoring God. However, the word Dios for God comes from the word for Zeus. So, a lot of ways it could be said my name is honoring Zeus. Kind of like that. Okay, and the last one's on this shelf, some of my favorite. We'll go with the one on the end here. And the one that starts it all, really, and this is, of course, the Willendorf Venus, a replica of the Willendorf Venus. Willendorf Venus was actually found in Austria, and it is Paleolithic. It was made somewhere between about 28,000 to 30,000 years ago. So, this may be one of the oldest religious icons ever found. Now, some people have argued that it's just Paleolithic porn, but I don't think so. This thing was actually made to be held, and it looks to have been not just a fetish, but something worshipped. And we find a lot of these goddesses figures, or these female figures, with pronounced genitalia and breasts, and practically no details to the head. So I think this very well may be a form of earth goddess. Now, there have been some that argue it can't be an earth goddess because, this was not an agricultural time period. They didn't need an earth goddess. Well, I find that ludicrous, because hunter-gatherers also gather, and what do they gather? Berries, nuts, food that grows from the earth, and they saw that it died and it was replenished. So the earth replenished them with food. Also, the game they hunted ate such grass and vegetation, so from the earth. So I think to say that ancient, hunter-gatherers didn't have earth goddesses is far from right. That's my opinion. And and earth goddesses from Lakshmi to they're still around, especially in the more ancient religions. Now, beside of that is the ancient god Nana, and actually also Inanna, which is also from Sumeria, also more popularly known by the Assyrian name Ishtar, the great goddess, and who had these horns. And I actually love this particular statue. I'm not really sure where they got this image from. I think it may have actually come from a rendition of a relief, but I really like it. Next to that, of course, is the famous the Diana of Ephesus, with all those mini breasts, all these mammary glands, to feed. And of course, Diana was a goddess related with Artemis, the goddess, the goddess of war, the goddess of wisdom. So, the goddess of the hunt. And here is like a feeding all mother, and was worshipped, of course, in Ephesus. And there's some famous statuette from that era, from that place, from that region. Okay, on this shelf, we're returning to Egypt, and we have this particular statue is of the god Ta, the god of the universe, the god of the verse of the universe. It said that he spoke, and the universe was created through his song. He was highly worshipped god. He was worshipped, particularly the city of Memphis, was the center for his worship. Interesting fact, actually the word Egypt comes from something pertaining to the god Ta, or people say Ptah, it's actually Ta. But the word Egypt comes from about the tip of Ta. In Memphis, the name for Memphis, which the Greeks dealt with, was called Hecata, or basically means the mansion of Ta, because the great temple of Ta was there in Memphis. It was his city, his nome. Well, the Greeks couldn't quite say that. They rendered it as Egyptos, and that's where we get the word for Egypt. So, yeah, little trivia there for you. Now, next to him, of course, is the god Thoth, or, mispronounced, Greek rendering of his name. The god of wisdom, the god of scribes. And they thought that he has the head of an ibis, which is a bird. The reason that they associate him with this bird is because this bird had a long beak that resembled a writer's reed. So, and of course, later on in Greek, he was associated with Hermes, and you get Thoth Hermes, and he was a god of wisdom and mysteries and hidden mysteries. So it's where you get the terms for hermetic lodges like the Golden Dawn and some of the others. So, yes. And interestingly, I should point out that the name Thoth is completely wrong. There is no theta. There is no th sound. Those are th in ancient Egyptian. His actual name would have been pronounced like Jut or Juti. So, yeah, interesting. And speaking of that, we have the god Asur, more commonly known in the Greek Osiris, the god of the Underworld, the father of Horus, whose brother Set, who's actually right next to him here, another statue of Set, is said to have tricked him, killed him, chopped him up, and threw him in the Nile. And his wife Isis reconstituted his body. And by the way, her name is Asa. It's Asa Nasser. Isis reconstituted his body, except for his penis, which she had to magically made a magical one, because his penis was eaten by a fish, and that fish was actually saw as to be sacred after that, by the way. And they fathered Horus, who went on to kill his uncle Set for doing this. Okay, I've already went over Set, and this is a more modern rendition of it. It was actually a present. And next to that is what is some speculate to be his son, and that is the god Anubis, or actually in Egyptian, Anpu, which I think is more cool than Anubis. The Jekyll-headed god, the god of embalming, the god of dead places, the god of the dead. An interesting reason he was associated with his totem, the jackal, is because jackals eat carrion, and they were commonly seen in graveyards, scavenging for corpses. So they thought these were the guardians. So hence the relation with Anubis. And of course Anubis is well known associated with mummification. Next to that is one of my favorites. Not really a god, but it is the... I put it here because of its association with a biblical myth, and this is the ram in the thicket. Now, there are two rams in the thicket. There were actually table legs, one next to the other. Hence, you can see here where the table would have set, and there was another one facing the other way, and it was set on it. When they were found, the archaeologists found them, sent one to the British Museum. You can still see it there, and the other one is here in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. So yeah, so I have that's just down the street from me, so it's nearby. It was first found. It's thought that it looked like a depiction of the famous story in Genesis of the ram in the thicket, where the ram got his head caught and was a replacement for the sacrifice of Isaac for Abraham. But in truth, it's just a goat standing up eating out of the trees. It's a very cool image. Next to this is another statue of Demeter, the goddess of the fields. It's a modern rendition, but I actually really like this one. I've already described that one. And then I got this one here, and this one is Diana of the Hunt with her hunting hound running nude with a spear. Really love this particular statue. So it's beautiful. And of course, Diana's related with the moon, and she's wearing a moon necklace. If you see, with the waxing waning moons on each side of a full moon in the middle. Now, final on this shelf is a god that actually never existed outside of fiction. It is H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. This is Cthulhu himself, or Cthulhu, however you want to pronounce it. There's no proper way to pronounce it. It's not supposed to be able to be pronounced by man. And, of course, there are a lot of people that actually believe in this sleeping god who lies in Rayleigh, dead but dreaming. This great Leviathan form of god that was written by H.P. Lovecraft, even though Lovecraft himself was an atheist and he admitted that he made this up. But, this statue is based upon the statue described in the famous story called Cthulhu. And I kind of had to have it. It's just really gruesome and cool. Yeah. Okay, last shelf. Now, if you notice, I got another Odin statue, and the reason is because when they sent me the first one, I noticed that the ear of one of the wolves was broke off. When I told the company, and they sent me another one and told me to keep that one, so I wasn't going to throw it away, so I just kept it. And of course, here we have two Mayan gods. These are the gods of maize, which had supposed to have the silk hair of maize. And of course, maize was a major crop for the Mayans as well as later on the Aztecs. This was a maize-based agricultural group. So I thought those were kind of interesting. This statue, of course, is just one of the, and it's not technically a god, but it is related with the afterworld. This is one of the famous Chinese statues found in the tomb of the first emperor. I just found it really interesting. And then, of course, here we're getting into the big wigs. These are two depictions, a small home altar of the Amitabha Buddha, and of course, next to it, the more Theravadan or called Hinayanan version of Shakyamuni Buddha. The Buddha, of course, and then he's here in the Earth Witness pose, touching the earth, showing that the earth was his witness to the right of enlightenment. Of course, the Buddha, meaning the enlightened one's real name, was Siddhartha Gautama, who lived somewhere around about between 400 and 500 BCE. So about 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, and is the most venerated human in history. Even though he never claimed to be divine, never claimed to be anything, except to teach people to sit and think and meditate and think. And he's the most worshipped man, most venerated man in human history. Kind of love that. And of course, we have another Buddha, this a more Asian Buddha, that the Buddha of wisdom. And next to that, how can you have a collection of gods without a big, gaudy, Sacred Heart Jesus? I had to have it. And then below that, of course, I have just a little crucifix, and the Virgin Mary, Virgin Mary and Jesus little home altar. Yeah. So, and next to that, well, there is one of these little fun statues, pop statues of Tim the Enchanter, for obvious reasons, from Monty Python. And next to that, the greatest of all teachers, the great master of all wisdom, Yoda. He has had to be there. And down below that, just if you didn't notice, there's a small tongue baby replica of the skull, the Australopithecus skull of called the tongue baby. Yes, that was actually eaten by a hawk, by a giant eagle. So yeah, just need a place to put it. Okay, guys. Well, that's my God collection. I'm sorry I know this video was a little long, but I think this one's been a long time in coming. If you stuck around to the end, thank you. And now I would say, please, if you are enjoying my content, I know my channel's been growing quite a bit lately, but I'd like to see more people. If you if you haven't subscribed, please hit this little King Henry head with my pretty face, and give me a join. Also give me a like. And if you have any comments or any questions about comparative religious studies, about men's fashion, of course, and about or about my gods, or some commentary, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear some discussion on it. Give me a comment down below. I'd love to read them. Okay, and stay tuned, because I got a lot more stuff coming as usual. And so until I see you next time, stay pretty.